and welcome to another episode of The Tigers Down Under. I'm your host this evening, Alex, and with me I have Dan.
Hey, how are you?
Good, it's been a long break between episodes with the international break, but we're back ready to go. Pretty important game coming up this weekend for City, but we'll cast our minds back first of all to our last game out, which was against Sheffield United. It was the last of a three-game run of pretty difficult fixtures against top of the table teams. Or as Adkins has said since the game, teams that are destined to be promoted to the Premier League. Um, and it was sort of a mixed game, I suppose. Looking at the lineup before the game, I think I actually tweeted out, is Adkins trying to get himself sacked because he dropped Bowen and Grzycki to the bench? Wilder at Sheffield United saying he was hugely surprised that we dropped our two most creative and attacking and dangerous players, and which he was clearly quite happy about. But it almost worked in our favour. We almost came away with a point, and it was just a late penalty that really cost us in the end, and it was a pretty soft one at that. I guess there's sort of two sides to the game from that sense, whether we're disappointed in 2 points, or sorry, a point dropped, I suppose, because we were holding on for a draw, or or we look at it as, well, we really could have gone out and actually tried to attack and tried to win the game, but we just didn't even show any sort of ambition to do that. So were you disappointed with the result, or were you sort of at least happy that we almost snatched a draw?
Um, yeah, I could go either way. I really could. It was, it was good to see. I mean, it was a terrible game to watch. I'm going to be honest. It was really boring to watch. It was so dull and defensive from our end. But in saying that, it was nice to see that we almost did keep a quality team. Like that would have been. I mean, it was 3 games in a row that we kept three top teams to minimal scoring. And the penalty, as you mentioned, was not the most clear cut. But I think that was the second time in about 5 minutes that Elphick got done for grabbing a hold of a shirt, and I think that's what did it because he grabbed someone on the halfway line only 5 minutes before that, and pulled him back really. I think that he got a yellow for that, but and I think that played a part in the decision to give the penalty. But yeah, it was surprising to see Bowen and Grosicki drop to the bench. It,
What was your take on that? Because obviously Bowen's scored, I think it's 4 goals in 5 games or something before that. And I mean, the signs are sort of there because he was taken off against, was it Leeds, I think, where he was basically our only attacking player and got brought off, and Adkins sort of seemed to have a different opinion to most
yeah,
people in saying, well, I didn't think he was, doing that much. So the signs are kind of there that Adkins was a little bit off Bowen, but to the rest of us, it seemed quite a strange one, and even to the opposition. And I think I said it at the time when Bowen was substituted in the previous game, where the commentators were saying that the home team commentators were saying that they were relieved that Bowen had gone off. Again, when you've got the opposition sort of being relieved that you've rested a player, I don't think that suggests it was a great decision.
I don't necessarily think it was the right decision, but part of that's just my mindset. I always think we should be going out to win every game.
Yeah.
And yeah, you saw what happened. So after they scored that penalty, and then all of a sudden we had to chase the game. We had to bring on attacking players. The last 20 minutes was not too bad. There was, there we were creating some opportunities, but we only gave ourselves 15 minutes really like to work with, and it was yeah. I think it would have been a very different game, obviously, if those two had played. Yeah, I think it would have been a better game to watch. I think we would have. I think it would have been a comparable scoreline. Sheffield may still have beaten us, but I think it would have been comparable, and it would have made. I think in general, everyone would have been happier with the result had you still gone out and played to actually win the game and lost, than played to not lose the game and lost.
Well, I think that's it, and I think it's the huge difference between this season and last season, where we were still drawing games, dropping points, losing games under Slatsky, but we were going out and attacking, and we could see that there was a lot of potential there and a lot of attacking threat in the side, even after Hernandez was injured. So we still had Grzycki, we still had Irvine, we still had Bowen, all chipping in, scoring goals last season, amongst others, and obviously Wilson later in the season. But the fact that we were actually going out and attacking sides, it boded quite well for when we had these sorts of games that we've got coming up against Preston. When we had these games at home and we could actually be confident that we were going to go out and score goals and we could actually win the game. Whereas now, yeah, okay, we've got positive results against top teams in the sense that we've restricted their scoring, um, got a draw against Borough, which was good. But the concern is that, yes, okay, we scored against Borough, but it was a penalty. Apart from that, we've really not shown much attacking impetus in any of those three games, except for, as you say, when we're chasing the game. If we go out and play like that from the start, get a bit more confidence into the players, get a bit more potential, fluidity, practice in attack, getting the players used to each other. I mean, Chris Martin must just be feeling, completely useless or completely left out in the cold with the fact that he's just left up top to kind of try and work magic on his own. Um, that you think, well, when Preston come to the KCOM, how are we going to suddenly flick a switch and go out and score two or three goals and blow them away, which is what we really need to do? I mean, you can't just expect the players to just flick a switch like that. And it's just, I just don't know where the attacking potential is going to come from.
Yeah, you're right. I think Adkins is he's maybe starting to get a bit too tricky. He's sort of changing. He's got a few tactical options up his sleeve, but he's starting just relying on having that formation switch or changing the play too much that there's no consistency in the way that we're playing between games. And you're right. Like with the particularly the forwards, like how are we supposed to gel this forward line together when like Martin's arrived on like the deadline day as a loan and then on all these things, like how are they supposed to gel with these guys that we've now obviously Bowen and Grzycki have been decided are going to be the main two attacking wingers. How are they supposed to gel when they don't play together? um, and that's concerning. um, but yeah, I think you're right, and you're right on the fact that these games coming up against Preston and the game against Reading, which went against us, and some of these other games coming up soon, that we really do need to be putting. We were talking before that, like after 12 games, we've scored 10 and conceded 19, and they're not good numbers. We really need to be bumping up the goals for, like, because I think we're just about equal lowest scorers in the division at the
Which
moment.
is which is crazy when we were I think we were the top scorers for for a large
Yeah,
chunk of the first half of last season.
we were for a long time last season. We were top
And
scorers.
Bowen was one of the top scorers in the division, which was crazy.
Yeah, I think I was just thinking when you were talking before about with Adkins and we were talking about playing not to lose and that, and I think that to me seems like you sort of afford to do that more in the top division when you can only fall, but when you're trying to climb, you really have to be trying to win.
Yeah.
I don't really think there's any other option. When you need to get up the table, you need to go up into the next division and back into that top tier. I don't think you can ever really afford to be playing conservatively. Not in our position anyway.
Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting one. I think there's going to be a lot to come out of that Preston game coming up, which we'll talk about in a second. I guess the last bit of positive news I wanted to touch on from the Sheffield United game was that Irvine managed to play the game despite a bit of a worry over his Achilles during the week before it. I think he'd suffered the injury against Leeds in the previous game. Also managed to play for Australia during the international break where he got an assist for one of our four goals, which was also great to see. It's a bit of a strange one at the moment with not a whole lot of players on international duty. We used to always have, half a dozen or even, more players going away for internationals, and I think it's only a couple now. I think Grzycki played a bit for Poland as well, and put in another good performance because he always seems to play pretty well for Poland, which is a bit of a funny one when you think the sort of standard of players that he's playing with, Lewandowski and others like that, to think that he's sort of playing for a bottom championship club and he's sort of lifts his game. He's one of those guys that sort of lifts his game to the occasion. I remember he was always quite good in Premier League games against, Arsenal and Chelsea and guys like that, but would sort of go missing in some of the smaller games.
Yeah, he do, he is he's our enigma at the moment. You just it's really is hard to figure him out. And when he's we always say it, but when he's on, and but it seems to be too often that he's not. But he so far since he's come back in the fold here, he seems to really have sort of just buckled down and is just putting in a shift. So it's nice to see, and I hope he keeps. Obviously, with the more game time he gets, the better he's going to get. So I'm seeing positive signs from him, even for us. So
And just on Grzycki, what did you make of his comments, I think, to the local press during the break, where he said basically he came back to the club after the World Cup and was told he was getting sold, so he just was told he wasn't playing, and that he actually reached out to the Polish coach to say, don't select me because I'm just not match fit because I'm in playing, which sort of puts a different spin on the fact that everyone thought he was having a strop and sitting out and refusing to play when actually it sounds like it was the club telling him not to play to stay fit. And the comparison that I heard as well, which was interesting, was it was very reminiscent of that January transfer window under Silva, where Snodgrass didn't play for a couple of games, and we were told he just wasn't training. And again, the perception was, well, it's Snodgrass having a strop because he wants to leave and forcing through a transfer, and he did get it to West Ham. But sounds like again that one might have as well have been Ehab basically saying, "Oh, don't play him. We don't want to get him injured if he's about to make a pretty lucrative move."
yeah, I suppose that's always the other side of the story that we I don't know whether we don't consider, or I suppose it always seems to just comes out well after the piece. And I mean, it probably doesn't surprise me if you think about it and you think about sort of where the alums where they put their focus, and especially late like the last couple of years, it's all about been trying to recoup their investment wherever they can. So if that's what they were thinking and they decided that, I mean, there are obviously like Krasicki had said that he wanted to go, so it's not like
Oh, sure, yeah,
necessarily a
yeah.
one way thing, but like obviously he said that, and then they've said, well, and obviously the Allens have, well, we can sell him, so we'll do that, and then for whatever reason it sort of didn't quite work out. Something about, yeah, with the offer came in from Sporting, and he was told from his manager that it was a better offer or something, but
Yeah, and then I
they
think they might have
accepted
changed terms or something. Yeah.
yeah, something strange. So all sorts of crazy thing. It just reeks of a little bit of greedy Ehab trying to be greedy. But I mean, based on what he's done so far, as I said before, I'm probably happy that he stayed.
Yeah, well, it's a good segue there and transition to talk about the other big news over the international break so far, which is the potential takeover of the club. I mean, we sort of touched on it last episode as news was starting to filter through of a bid backed by a Saudi prince, supposedly led by Paul Duffin. There's now been news of a second bid by a consortium called Sportico, I believe their name is, claiming to be backed by a bunch of UK, US investors and endorsed by the Supporters Trust, which is probably the most interesting thing out of it, to be honest, is the fact that they've come out so publicly to back one of the three takeover bids, because is a third one as well, which is supposedly a US-based consortium as well. And I've heard from a few places that that one is actually surprisingly in the best position to actually complete their takeover. So, despite all the publicity and focus around the Paul Duffin-led bid. Um, it's sort of all a bit of smoke and mirrors at the moment because I guess due diligence has been or is being completed by a few different parties, and then after that, it all kind of goes quiet because there's all just the negotiating around fees and purchase price and all that sort of thing. I think in a weird way, this sort of situation, it's actually no news is good news because if we heard anything, it would either be to say it's completed and it's done, or that it's fallen over and collapsed. So as long as there's quiet, I think it means that negotiations are ongoing. I had heard from a few places that there was a chance it was going to be finished over the international break, but I'm not sure. I think that's probably a bit optimistic. And as you touched on before, there's always the infamous greed of the alums in terms of trying to get the best possible price they can and, as much money out of the buyer as they can, whether it's, a percentage of future, transfer fees or parachute payments or whatever it is. Um, I'm sure they'll do their best to give themselves the best deal. So um, it's promising and it's exciting that there's three interested parties and it sounds like it's pretty far progressed. My fear is that the alums sort of play them off against each other and it ends up collapsing. But the other side of that coin is that if there's three parties interested as opposed to one, there's a good chance that at least one of them will complete the takeover and things can move forward in a positive manner. Um, but what's your take on the whole situation? I know we sort of touched on it last week, and it's a bit difficult to add too much more to that. But if you've got any sense of, which party you'd prefer to take over the club, or your sense of how everything's sort of panning out in the news so far.
Oh, look, I don't know if I necessarily have a preference in terms of who takes over, but in terms of the Sportico bid, the one thing I did like about that, so they're endorsed by the Supporters Trust, and the Supporters Trusts are going to be responsible for some percentage of the fee, the money. But what they were planning on doing with that bid was they were planning on there was going to be a member of the supporters trust was going to represent the trust on the board.
Yeah, which I think that's a great
And I
great thing.
think
Yeah.
that that general idea should just really just happen anyway. There should be someone from our supporters trust on the board, or at least maybe not even necessarily on the board, but they need to be in a position within the club where they have the opportunity to voice the concerns like straight to the source. Any like concerns or ideas or whatever that the supporters trust is coming up with, they need to actually have be in a position, and the club needs to enable them to have that position to actually build that relationship and start developing um, you know, developing trust between club and that um, but yeah, you know what
Well,
I'm trying
yeah,
to say.
yeah, yeah, I do, and it is great. And my only hope is that it's not that the supporters trust has sort of backed themselves into a corner in the sense that if, for instance, this third unknown bid from the US were to succeed, that they don't sort of view the supporters trust as, oh well, you supported basically our competitor, and therefore there's any sort of mistrust or frustration between the parties. I hope that the manner in which and look, I've got nothing but praise for the Supporters Trust. I'm a lifetime member of the Supporters Trust, and I encourage everyone to support the Supporters Trust because, as you're saying, they're basically our representation with the club. Obviously not great dialogue at the moment, but that's not down to any misdoing on their part. I just hope that whichever party does succeed in taking over the club, that going forward there can be really positive relations with the Supporters Trust, and as you say, it's a really good way to give the fans a voice and to have really positive dialogue with the club because we've said so many times that what the alums have done in a lot of ways just doesn't make any sense from a business perspective, from a football club's perspective, or from any perspective really, other than to think that they're just doing things out of spite because there's so many easy wins that they could make where they could change things to make themselves more money and make the fans happier. Put the name on the crest. Um, they've done a decent job of rebranding the club back to Hull City in all avenues, and I think that could have been done a lot sooner. But putting the name back on the crest, I think would see a lot more people willing to buy club merchandise, for instance. And you just think, well, if it's going to bring in more money because you're going to get more merchandise sold, and it's going to make everyone happier, and it's going to mend some rifts, why would you not do it? And it's things like that where you just think there's this. The only answer is it's spite. Um, but there's so many easy wins. So you would hope that whichever party buys the club, the supporters trust is able to give them any sort of help or advice or anything that they're after in the ways that they can best associate with and build a relationship with the fan base.
Yeah, I think for any of those the offers that come in, any of those consortiums or whatever, they're one of their first moves, or even the supporters trust needs, maybe they need to make the first, be the first move as soon as that takeover is through, and finalize that. It needs to send the envoy, send the messenger that we're we're here. We want to start off, get off on the right foot. And I think as long as they do that, then I don't see that there shouldn't really be any problems moving forward, regardless of I think their involvement in this Sportico uh, bid.
Definitely. Well, we'll move forward then and discuss the game coming up this weekend. We've already sort of alluded to it a little bit, and the importance of it. But we're facing Preston. I think they're 22nd in the table at the moment. They were in last place last game day, but our loss to Sheffield United and their win over Wigan have seen them leapfrog us. But it was only their first win in their last 5 games, with 4 losses being their other results. So they're in pretty dismal form, I would say, and they're definitely a side that are there for the taking if we go out on the right foot at home in front of a home crowd. We really should be going out and beating them. We talked about the fact that last season we'd see sides like Birmingham, Burton, basically all the B sides. I think there was another one as well that we beat 3 or 4 nil at home. And you'd be expecting a side like Preston to be another pretty straightforward win. I mean, we beat Ipswich at home, so positive signs with a result like that against the side around us, and you have to hope we can see more of the same against Preston. So what's your take on the game coming up, and what changes would you see made to the side?
Um, we have to win, so I see a win. I'm not seeing anything else. We have to win. That's all there is to it. Bowen and Grzycki come back in. Uh, I don't really know if there's any other changes I'd make. I don't remember what the lineup was for the last game. It was so long ago.
I'll pull it up now,
But
but I think yeah, as you're saying, it's really
it's
Grzycki and Bowen are the ones who you'd want to see come back into the side.
yeah, you're
Um,
talking. I think Evandro might be fit again, so
yeah,
I think off the bench late in, through midway through the second half or something, get him back in, and I'd be happy to see how he goes. But I expect to see if Batty's fit, Batty, Henriksen, Irvine in the middle. Then you've got
so
Bowen and
last yeah
Grzycki,
last game
and probably
we were 3-5-2 with Martin and Campbell up front, with Kane and Kingsley as
uh,
the wing backs, or the wingers, I guess, depending on how you view that formation. And then, as you say, yeah, we had Irvine, Henriksen, and Batty in midfield. So I guess, yeah, and look, it is hard to see how you slot Grzycki and Bowen back into that side, whether it's you play Bowen up top instead of Campbell, perhaps, or you change the formation around a little bit, because Kane is in pretty impressive form at the moment, and the only other thing I could see is switching formation. But as you said, I mean, Adkins is getting a little bit too tricky, I think, and shifting things around a bit too much. Um, Looks like we had Lehigh as one of the 3 centre backs in that game against
yeah,
Sheffield
we did.
United. Um, whether I don't know, whether you shift Lehigh up to the right wing position that Kane's in, switch Kane to where Kingsley is, and then drop Kingsley, and play another midfielder perhaps, and switch to a 4-4-2 or 4-2-3-1, something like that. It's a tough one, because it's tough to sort of see how you fit Bowen and Grzycki back in, whether you play a 4-3-3 perhaps and play them on the wings either side of Martin. I don't know how aggressive we'd want to go against Preston, but as you're saying, you kind of run the risk, if you change things around too much, that the players just can't really settle into it anyway.
Yeah, I think we just need to. I think we just Adkins needs to figure out whether. I mean, he's had 2 weeks now. Hopefully, he's gone back and watched every game this year, all 12 of them, and gone. Of the what 4 formations or whatever that I've tried. Which worked best. Which players are working best in which position. I think that's what he should have been really. They should have really been doing for themselves over the last couple of weeks with this international break, is reviewing all that and trying to figure out what is working best for us. I don't really, I don't buy into the so much into the adjusting or the way you play to suit the opposition. I think because if you control the ball, who cares how the opposition
Yeah.
lines up? So I think we just need to focus really on building our own squad, building our own team and our own formation, building the way we play, and just focusing on that and not worrying about going, oh well, they're really dangerous going forward, so we're going to spring all these and play really defensively because at the end of the day, it hasn't worked anyway. So we may as well just find the way where we can best utilize our players going forward, and then hopefully get some results and start going up the table.
So then, what's your score prediction for this one then?
3-1 to City. I'm going wild.
Absolutely. I think I could see. I think probably a 2-0 sort of win for City. I think it'll be one of those regulation games, hopefully. But you never know. I think if we lose this game, it then becomes very interesting to see how the side responds because once you start getting adrift at the bottom of the table, you start to worry a little bit about the mentality of the players, and whether we start to go the way of a team like Sunderland of just sort of dropping our heads and just basically collapsing down into the next division. So it's not a must-win game in the sense that if we don't win it, we're getting relegated, but it is a must-win from the point of view that if we want to start moving up the table, as you say, and sort of recover a bit of a winning mentality and a bit of a confidence for the team, I think we need to be winning this one. So I guess we'll see how we go. But thank you so much for joining me, Dan.
No problems.
And thank you everyone for listening in. We'll be back this time next week. And until then, come on, City. You've been listening to the official Hull City Australia podcast. For more discussion, join us on Facebook in the Hull City AFC Australian Supporters Group or follow us on Twitter at Hull City AFC Oz. The music was created by Amber and Black.
There's no turning back 'cause you're out.